The goal of the late Dave Epstein was to find a drug that treats the cause of glaucoma by improving trabecular meshwork outflow. After many years of research, Aerie Pharmaceuticals was formed and refined a Rho Kinase inhibitor called Netarsudil. In April 2018, this came to market as Rhopressa, and March 2019 combined with latanoprost as Roclatan. Today, I'm talking with Rick Lewis, a glaucoma colleague based in Sacramento and Chief Medical Officer for Aerie Pharmaceuticals, and we're talking about glaucoma. Rick Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about the Rho Kinase inhibitors and how they came to be, the mechanism of action, how they differ from the other glaucoma medications out there, and I guess as well the Dave Epstein origins.
Yeah, I think that's
class of drugs.
That's a good start because many of us know Dave Epstein, and he was the chairman at Duke. And prior to that, one of the great researchers in glaucoma, particularly in the outflow system. And, you know, it was his vision to find a drug that treats the cause of glaucoma, that treats the cause of elevated pressure. You know, we've been treating with a variety of drugs, topical medications and pills that lower pressure indirectly. They either reduce aqueous production or enhance outflow, but they really don't directly work on the trabecular meshwork, which is the site of the problem. And so, you know, he had a vision and a dream to find a drug. He went through a number of different compounds getting to this one, but the dream was to treat the cause of the problem.
Right.
So, you know, it's an interesting story because he hooked up with some other folks at Duke and Dr. Casey Kopczynski, who is the chief scientific officer for Aerie. And they began to work on the ROCK inhibitors. Rho Kinase at the time was understood, but really had no direct application to ophthalmology. And
so what is the Rho Kinase?
So Rho Kinase is an enzyme. It's ubiquitous in the body. There's a lot of different areas, different tissues that have Rho Kinase in it. But in the eye, it functions to sort of enhance contractility and movement of the meshwork. And so that function begins to dissipate over time in glaucoma patients. So they get poor outflow function. And, you know, testing a variety of Rho Kinase compounds that could enhance that function. They struck upon a few that actually worked to alter this actin contractility equation in the meshwork.
Got it.
And 14 years and about $500 million later, we now have first Rhopressa and more recently Roclatan.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a dream that took a lot of time, money, and perseverance.
Yeah. It sure did.
Yeah.
And really, it not started from any pharmaceutical company, and now a pharmaceutical company came out of.
Yeah. So
this process.
you need a lot of funding for something like this, and they had with David Epstein's connections and in Casey's and a few others, they began to raise money, got venture capital money to start, and
Right.
and then they had an IPO and went on the public markets, and which is probably about 6 years ago. And so it's been publicly traded, and finally we're here. We're at the promised land, we hope, with getting pressure down.
Right. So it's available at least in the United States for about a year now.
Yes.
What other countries?
So Rhopressa was approved it was December of 18. No, let me see. December of 17.
Right.
Actually got on the market in about April of 18, and then just a few days ago, here we are now in 2019, in March 15th of 2019, just 2 days ago, Roclatan. So Rhopressa is a ROCK inhibitor, Netarsudil, and the offspring now is the combination of latanoprost and Rhopressa called Roclatan, and that drug is a once a day drug that lowers intraocular pressure.
So how does let's just go back to Rhopressa itself. How does it work to lower the eye pressure? It seems that it's purported to have multiple mechanisms of action.
Yeah, it does. It's an interesting story. It definitely works on the trabecular meshwork, so predominantly in enhancing outflow, and it also gets some additional support by working on the episcleral venous system, so you get some effect of pressure reduction from that. There are potentially other mechanisms that have been discussed, but the main mechanism is through the outflow system in the trabecular meshwork.
Okay. Does it also act on the uveoscleral outflow as well?
Slightly.
Because I've seen that on slides where it's showing that as well. So how does it work if you're combining with the prostaglandin analog now with the Roclatan?
Yeah.
It's still additive as that combination?
The effect of uveoscleral outflow is marginal compared to what the prostaglandins do.
Oh, okay.
So latanoprost, the addition of latanoprost to the Rhopressa molecule gives it this sort of dual mechanism of action, both through the meshwork and through the uveoscleral outflow system. And the studies that were done for Roclatan, which were called the Mercury trials, there were 3 of them, and really were effective. No other drug was able to show superiority to latanoprost. So this is the first time we've had a drug in 23, 24 years that actually is superior to latanoprost by itself.
Yeah, that's really incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
And finally, not just another copycat drug.
Right.
So
yeah.
So where do you fit this in with your practice? Is it first-line agent? Or?
Yeah, I think that that's a good question. There's a lot of answers to it. First of all, I to stay on label, the drug is approved for open-angle glaucoma. That's a labeling indication to lower intraocular pressure. However, we feel that Rhopressa will be a good adjunct both to latanoprost, and though we don't have data supporting it, we think it'll be a good adjunct to other mechanisms of action because it's the only one that works directly on the meshwork. So theoretically, it should work in addition to a beta blocker, or in addition to an alpha agonist. I'm repeating, we don't have data to support it yet. Right. So for Rhopressa, it had been used over the past year after prostaglandin had been started, and a lot of ophthalmologists were all fairly conservative, so it tended to fall 3rd or 4th down the road. We think it's much more effective on the second line. So where we were originally hoping that Rhopressa would be used further up in the plan, not as a 4th or 5th eye drop, but perhaps as a second drop in addition to latanoprost. Or if people can't take a prostaglandin, and it could be used in addition to timolol, but the data is forthcoming. Now with Roclatan, obviously this could be a first-line drug. It has very good efficacy, has the same safety profile that Rhopressa has, which there are some issues with redness. We have a little bit more redness than we see with prostaglandins, but over 80% of the patients found it tolerable and had no problem with the degree of redness, and we're quite happy with the efficacy.
Is that extra redness just with the Roclatan or with Rhopressa on its own? Well,
Rhopressa by itself, which is a vasodilator, causes some redness, some hyperemia. Of course, the prostaglandins do as well.
Exactly.
And so the combination together, slightly more with Roclatan than you saw with latanoprost or Rhopressa by itself. About 50% of the patients in the study had hyperemia.
Is it too soon to tell if it's just hyperemia or if it's increasing subconjunctival scarring? Assuming we don't have data.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting scarring, and I'm speculating because we don't have the data. But I don't think it's scarring. I think it's a vasodilator. It's vasodilating, so we're seeing, and that's partly how it's working in episcleral venous system is by vasodilating that system too. However, the redness can be pronounced, and when I prescribe it personally, and this is Rhopressa because we don't have Roclatan. Although I was in the clinical trial for Mercury, but for Rhopressa, I will hand patient a sample of it, and I'll say, you're going to get redness with this eye drop. Many of our eye drops cause redness. If this one's not tolerated, we'll go on to something else. Exactly. But I think the efficacy data is so impressive that I think it's worth a try, and hopefully you'll see that without significant redness. And most patients do well. A few patients come back and say, It's too red. I don't like this.
Great.
Yeah.
Any idea on the timeline for this coming to Canada?
That's a good question. We did a couple of clinical trials in Canada, and we have begun the process of getting an approval there. I can't speak to how quickly the regulatory body in Canada reacts to the data, but it's certainly a goal is to get it approved in Canada very soon.
Great.
Yeah.
So, do you have other studies that are in the works now? It must be hard as one company that is just doing these two agents.
Yeah.
To do all these studies.
It's financially challenging. These studies, as I mentioned, are expensive, and we have a pipeline both in the glaucoma era as well as also in retina. So we have also initiated some studies treating macular edema and hopefully macular degeneration. So and those studies are just starting right now, and that will be at least initially a combination of a steroid and Rhopressa and Netarsudil.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So,
any other comments before we wrap up?
No, I think it's an interesting time. I mean, our efficacy data was very impressive. We had over 40% of the patients had pressures less than 14 in the Mercury trial, and
that's amazing.
I don't think there's a MIGS device that can claim that. So I think it could usher in a new era in terms of what our expectations are for getting the pressure down.
Yeah. You're hitting like trabeculectomy kind of levels there.
Exactly. Yeah. So
great.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking today.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Talking About Glaucoma is a podcast of indeterminate frequency and duration. It's available for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, PocketCasts, and many other podcast services. Please rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about it so that it can reach more listeners. Drop me a line at podcast@iguy.org with your show ideas. That's podcast@iguy.org.